Hello and welcome to sim.bc, and today I'm just going to introduce, right, and I know that everybody who has a microphone and has used a microphone and a soundboard is just going to smash their heads into a wall right now. I advise you not to, mates. I advise you not to, but I recently realized that there is a gain function on the soundboard. I know, I'm like a genius when it comes to these kind of things. I am technically inclined. That's all I'm trying to say here, right? That's all I'm trying to convey, that point. No, but apparently there is a gain function on the soundboard, which makes it so that if you increase that, it will be easier for people to hear you. The volume of the microphone will be enhanced even before it goes into the software in the computer, so you don't have to digitally enhance it in the computer. You can analogically, so to say, or do it in an analog way, enhance the audio before it goes into the software, which makes the quality of the audio that much better. I mean, it's such a difference apparently. I checked up all the YouTube channels, right, discussing these things, because I was using, they're not in frame, but I was using some drums yesterday in order to record some stuff for my upcoming song, or a song that I'm trying to make, just a bit of a hobby project, really. And I realized all of these things, that you can use reverbs. Apparently there's something called an equalizer and some things like this. And I realized that this pop filter right here, that's because when you say stuff like p, like p, there comes up a lot of air goes out of your mouth when you say P. You know, the letter P, and human brains have learned to interact with this with these kind of letters in such a way that they don't recognize the airflow coming out. They just recognize the letter. But well, a microphone doesn't do that. You just get overpowered by the air that we blow into it when we say stuff like P. But that's why we have a pop filter. Anyway, that's not why you're here, mates. You're not here in order to listen to me talking about them stuff that you already either isn't interested in, right? Or that you, well, already know, because you probably are much better with all of these kinds of equipment than I am, so to say. You're probably much more familiar. No. You're here to hear about them questions. And as per usual, mate, as per usual, we're going to start about recapping what we've done so far in this little project. So, tips and tricks for making an in-between question that is not too hard and not too easy, and it's interesting to your audience. From a couple of days ago's video, we know that people tend to drift both in and out of conversations when not feeling engaged, which makes them having a harder time understanding the context in which a question is asked or is posed, and hence making said question a hard experience, even though it's objectively, based on the other people in the room, let's say, might have been a really easy one and really easy question. So, asking necessary questions in order to keep the audience engaged is one thing, but it also needs to be kept short and simple. Not short in the sense that it's a short discussion, but rather that the question takes 15 to 30 seconds to formulate and not 10 minutes, so that people, drift away. And simple, not in a way that it should be an easy question, but in the sense that it should have one objective to answer instead of 15 different ones. Ask direct questions, kind of goes hand in hand in simple, not aggressively direct, not abstractly indirect, but direct enough so that the audience will know what answer you are looking for as a lecturer. Because if they don't know, then they might think that the question is excessively hard or too easy, based on the miscommunication between the speaker and the audience, so to say, the subject. So, what are we going to talk about today then? We're going to pick up on tips and tricks number 4, number 4. Am I right, people? And that is ask one question at a time. Yet again, these tips and tricks, some of them are just stuff that you will be like, haven't we already discussed this? And some of them you will be like, well, that's bloody obvious, mate. How can you not ask one question at a time? But no matter if you think that this is obvious or not, believe it or not, mates, there are other people, right, behind the screens, out in the world, who will hear this for the very first time, and they will be thinking like, holy moly, you can ask one question at a time instead of 15 or 16 different ones? Is that actually helping me? And yes, those people do exist. So just keep that in mind as we're going forward. So, asking one question at a time, it is important. And I know that we've been discussing the crucial perspective of not making something excessively hard and excessively complex just by adding more things to it. And this is kind of the same idea here. You don't want to make something that is simple very complex unnecessarily. So asking one question at a time will help you, what should we say, help you transfer this idea of not making anything too complex unnecessarily. Why? Well, because just imagine, right, that you're walking up in the classroom, right, and the teacher is asking you, where have you been? What time it is? Do you know the question to this answer? Do you know all of the 15 different diagnoses that we should have learned today? What is the first theory on the board? What is the PowerPoint talking about? What shoes are you having? Who's your best friend, right? Who's your mate, your closest mate? On the right, not on your left. What did you have for lunch this morning? What breakfast did you do? And what did you get on your latest test in sociology? Now, you might be standing there like, what? What was the question again? Because you perhaps were looking for one question and thinking that this was an excessively long question, but instead the teacher just said like 10 or 15 different questions at once, and you'd be like, I know the answer to all of these questions in isolation, but I will not know them if you just post all of these questions to me directly, and I will need to answer them all at once, because, well, there are many different reasons for why. As we've been stating before, people tend to drift in and out of conversation. So if you're standing there just asking them questions, right, just bombarding them with questions with no clear dialogue, just like a monologue, and the other person just standing there like, they might drift out of the conversation. They might be looking you dead in the eye, but not listening to what you're saying at all, not connecting the dots, so to say. And that's not them being rude, that's just how we operate, unfortunately. Some people have a hard time concentrating for a long period of time, and if it takes you a long time to state many different small questions, well, maybe you should have just stated one question at a time with an answer in between. And this is also because you might have known the answer to all of the questions, just that, well, you don't remember the questions. And not only that, if you're, as a lecturer, want to keep engagement, you want to create a parameter, an environment where people actually answer, and where people are feeling engaged and they're interacting with you as a teacher and they're actually feeling as part of the subject, then this one question at a time is excessively important, and people tend to understate this, right? They tend to underestimate the power of asking one question at a time. Many people will be like, oh, does it really matter? Because if the students are good, right? If the students know what they're doing, perhaps they're taking notes of the questions. But just imagine this then, to answer that quite quickly. Imagine that I'm starting here talking, and then all of a sudden I'm saying, what kind of, I don't know, what kind of clothing are you wearing? And then I just keep going with me normal rant, right? You will have been taking notes or just listening to what I've been saying, and then all of a sudden I'm slipping in a question there, and I'm not looking for the answer directly. I might talk to the point that I'm trying to make, and then ask you for the answer to the question that I made in the context of what I was discussing. And you will be sitting there like, I didn't take a note of that because I didn't think it was a question. I thought it was a bit of a rhetorical one. That's also important, that many questions might be thought to be rhetorical if they're too easy, so to say, and you don't make notes of them because they're stating so many, because you're thinking, oh, they're trying to make a point, or they're trying to convey a point, so that you don't take notes. So then it will be hard to answer them because you don't remember them yet again. Just a quick little, what you were saying, argument for why it's hard, even though you might take notes, why a good student, so to say, will have taken notes, because it's not always easy to take notes, because you don't always know that it's a question that's serious, so to say. Anyway, but yet again, if you are such a lecturer or such a teacher that wants to create this environment where everybody's talking to everybody, right? They're feeling engaged, they're interacting with the course, they're interacting with the class, they're interacting with each other, then it's a really easy way of creating this environment is by asking one question at the time. And I know that most people will sit there and be like, well, why? Well, because if I'm asking you, right, I'm asking you something introductory to the discussion. I might be asking something really fundamental, like, what is this? And then I will stop there and let somebody answer. And perhaps I will specify that this is not a rhetorical question, this is the entry question for the discussion. And people will be like, aha, okay, so it's supposed to be easy. There is just looking for, this is a water bottle. So I'm asking, what is this? Somebody's raising their hand, and I'm saying, well, you, and they're saying it's a water bottle. Well, that's great. What does it contain? Now people will say that's water. Well, yes, it's true. You see how I'm doing here? Even though it's easy questions, trying to keep the interaction between teacher and student all at the time, so that they have the time to interact and feeling engaged and not drifting out the conversation. Because if I'm just talking all the time, it's very hard. It's very easy for students to just hear the same voice all over again. and drift out. But if it's different people giving different answers to different questions, then you're not only engaging those students who are answering questions, you're also engaging the rest of the people, because they will be hearing a different voice. And don't underestimate the different voice thing, because if you're just talking, especially if you have quite a monotone voice, if you're just talking at the same rate all the time, people will fall asleep no matter how interesting it is. That's just that's just how we operate yet again. It's unfortunate but true for most people, at least for me, right? But then when you've started saying this is a water bottle, it contains water, what else can it contain? And now we're getting into the idea that this is maybe a bit of a harder question, so that if you've stated all of these 3 questions in a row, people would say like, oh, it's a water bottle, what does it contain? Well, water, obviously. What more can it contain? What does it mean? What do you mean more can it contain? Maybe, and then you've like spent all of your time, so to say, that you had to think about the answers to the questions, coming up with the obvious answers. Now that we've gone through it one by one question, one answer, a question, an answer, a new question that's a bit more complex, still easy though, people will have an easier time following the conversation, following discussion, and thinking about a potential answer. And from that, you will be saying, well, it could be different kinds of beverages, it could be different substances, it could be different chemicals, it could be air, it could be nothing, right? But what kind of repercussion, what kind of consequences could this have on the environment? And this could be a really broad question in and within itself. So I would argue that you shouldn't have another introductory question to it. But we've already established that we're talking about water bottles, and we're talking about maybe a healthy lifestyle is a consequence of having water bottles, because people are choosing water, right, instead of Coke, for instance, or Pepsi, instead of other, so to say, unhealthy beverages that have lots of calorie in them. Maybe they're taking the water bottle instead. But you've yet again introduced the concept of what we're talking about. You've asked one question, gotten one answer, introduced the concept in this way, not by making it excessively complex, but making something that is easy really easy, even not only for you as the teacher, right, but also for the students who are trying to follow what you're talking about. Because keep in mind, as a teacher, even though you think that this is the easiest thing in the world, maybe you have a PhD in the subject and you're teaching people at high school, right, there's a huge and vast difference in knowledge here, right? The basis of what you know is very different. So even though you might think that this is the easiest thing in the world, such a way of stating one question at a time in order to introduce this interaction in the course can prove to be vital, because this can pique an interest with the students that will later transcend and will later translate into them actually picking up the more harder questions and actually want to interact with them, because they've gotten a good understanding of what we're talking about, like from the base upwards. Now, this doesn't always work, but it's a good tip and a good trick they can use in order to not make too easy questions, but not make too hard questions either. But finding a way of introducing the bridge there in between easy and hard, and a walk that way, kind of holding them in their hands, let's say. You're kind of leading them the way there, but they're still thinking by themselves and they're still giving you the answers. But yet again, just gonna state this, right, in the end, right? I'm gonna end with this. So that's how you say it. If I tell you that I have 15 different questions and I'm just asking them all, and you have to think about all of them, maybe you're starting to think about question number 1, question number 7, question number 8, question number 10, and then question number 2. Maybe that wasn't how I was intending it to be. Maybe I wanted you to think about question 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and so on and so forth. Maybe that was my intention, because then you're getting the linear progression of difficulty that's increasing. So that is why, in order for you to kind of control this behavior so that people does not do that, you want to say one question at a time, so that we're following this linear progression, right? And you can control where the discussion is going, how it is evolving, and where it will be taken later on when you get into the more difficult parts. So that was everything to be taken away from this little video, mates. One question at a time. It's easy for you to control the environment in which you're moving from an easy question to a hard one, and you don't overwhelm people, and you don't make it overwhelmingly complex, even though it's simple, because you can do that if you just bombard people with questions, because yet again, they drift in and out of conversation. That was everything for me today, mates. Tomorrow we're going to discuss the avoiding, leading, and biased questions. And that is a very interesting point, especially with all politics and stuff that is happening right now in the world. Maybe some real life examples there. Anyway, have a nice one, mates, and I'll see you tomorrow.